welcome to the Simply Christian Life. My name is Michael Hunn, and I'm the Bishop of the Diocese of the Rio Grande, which encompasses the entire state of New Mexico and the far west part of Texas, including 40% of the U.S.-Mexico border. There's been a lot in the news media and online lately about asylum seekers in the United States and those who are currently being deported, having been legally present in the United States under the last administration. Quite frankly, there's been a lot of misinformation about who asylum seekers are, implying that everyone who migrates to the United States is doing something illegal or criminal. In this episode, I want to share with you an interview with the Reverend Christina Rathbone. Christina Rathbone was the first border chaplain of the Diocese of the Rio Grande, and she's written a book called The Asylum Seekers, which talks about a particular moment in time when families were being detained as they sought to legally claim asylum in the United States of America. In this moment, it seems that the policy of the United States government is to detain families again. So it might be helpful for you to know more about who the people are who have legally claimed asylum in the United States, who have often fled for their lives. The book is called The Asylum Seekers by the Reverend Christina Rathbone, and what follows is an interview with her. I want to thank Tina Rathbone for her ministry, brief though it was, in the Diocese of the Rio Grande, and I want to thank the Reverend Canon Lee Curtis for conducting this interview.
All right, y'all. So I am with the Reverend Christina Rathbone, with Tina, who I have had the pleasure of knowing since 2019, and kind of one of the great coincidences of my ministry, not just here in the DRG, but ever. And so, Tina, why don't you tell folks a bit of the story about how you got here, and then we can talk about a bit about where that went. But beyond the specifics of what we did, what I really want to give the clergy here in the DRG is a bit of your philosophy of ministry, which has been huge for me personally, and not many folks in the Diocese of the Rio Grande have had the privilege of sitting down with you and mulling over things, and you being like, "No, Lee, that's too big. No, Lee, that's not going to work. No, Lee, you need to dial it back. Like, keep the first thing first." And so I want to, knowing how big that's been in my ministry, wanted to give you a chance to share that with the clergy, the DRG. And so that's kind of where we are. So how did you come here? How'd you get to know us? What have you been up to?
Yeah, it's great to see you, Lee. And yeah, what a pleasure to be back in contact with you and all the priests of the Diocese of the Rio Grande, which is, I count you guys as my other diocese. So I don't know if that's, too just outrageous of me, but that's how I think of you all. So peace and blessings. Yeah, it was a kind of a gift of God, I think. You and I meeting each other, and my coming even to El Paso. I had left Boston, where the Diocese of Massachusetts is my home diocese, and I'd worked for many, many years with homeless folks here in Boston, creating with them a ministry out of our cathedral here. And when it was time to leave there, that was 2019, I'm half Cuban, half English. My family had all come to this country with nothing and were given an opportunity and a chance to make a new life for themselves here. So I sort of felt compelled, in part because of my own family story, to go to the border and see what it is I could do, both as a priest of the Episcopal Church and also as a citizen of this country. Passport-carrying citizen. What responsibilities did that entail, and what opportunities did it give me to be of some small assistance to others? I originally thought that I would settle in Tijuana and do some ministry there by the border. But when I came for a brief visit to El Paso, Juarez, things just started taking off. I met with you. You were all so welcoming and generous, and interested and keen to get involved and ready. And so sort of against my initial desire, and because the path seemed so clear, and to do otherwise would have been just very obviously disobedient to the great power of God, I ended up staying here, and together we created the Bridge Chaplaincy, which has been such a blessing to so many.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think that's a really important point to make. So Tina is the proto bridge chaplain. So Ana Reza has made an amazing impact in the diocese, and you were the one who really kind of drove the impetus for that, and prototyped the position. And so hugely thankful for the legacy that's still continuing
Yeah,
in the
and I'm
DRG.
so thankful for Anna, and for the process that found her and for her incredible witness. Yeah.
Mm. No, she's remarkable. Um, and we can go into that. If I say too much, she'll get upset with me. But we are collective members of the Honor Reza fan club here in the DRG.
Founding members.
Right, founding members. Only members, the distinction there. No, certainly not the only members. Um, so as I said in the beginning, I think and going back to the kind of developing of the bridge chaplaincy position, and the way that we've thought about these things. I remember it was just before the pandemic hit, and we were kind of talking through what would this be. It was after the shift from the work directly on the bridge to starting to integrate with the shelters, with the Diocese of Northern Mexico. Um, and I remember having these conversations that were just hugely illustrative or illuminating for me, because my impulse at that point was programatize everything, right? Because that's what diocesan employees do. We programatize everything. And I remember again that just like this kind of refrain that you gave back to me of small and real, and avoiding trying to systematize things that are really inherently dependent on relationships,
Yeah.
rather than systems. And I have gone to, at like kind of throughout the pandemic, I've gone back to that. After the pandemic, as we started settling into the shelter that we had been operating out of St. Christopher's, that was still, we had these constant kind of pushes of, can you expand your capacity to 50? Can you expand your capacity to 100? And by that time, it had kind of integrated so far into me that I've been like, no, we're good at 25. We can do 25. Um, but that's a real push, and I know it's not, the ministry that we've done here on the border is an example of that, but I know you've embodied that in different ways. So what I really was hoping for this is especially at this time where
Mm,
we're facing so many things that seem so big, so much bigger than we are.
yeah.
How would you describe your idea, your philosophy of your philosophy of ministry, talking about small, real things? What is it? How do you think about it? And then we can go from there.
Yeah. Thank you, Lee. What an incredible opportunity. I think it's all based, as all good things are, in Jesus.
Hmm.
Uh, the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. The Word became flesh. It's so taking all that infinity of the Word and having it be reduced into the extreme finitude of becoming flesh, right? As finite as I am here, someone who's born, who will live, and who will die, and then come to life again in a new way over and over again throughout our lives. So I think for me, that is what is so profound about Christianity, that astonishing statement about the nature of God's love for us all, and of God's self-giving that reduced God's self to the size of a human being and the truth of a human being. And that for me shifts the scale of my desire, because it means that every human being that I'm given to meet, sometimes to help, sometimes to be helped by, is a container of the divine, and therefore contains everything within them. And as you said, that is the ground of all the work that I do. It is always relational between me and my role as a priest, of course, and all that that represents, the whole community of saints, the community of the church, and the person in front of me, and everything that they represent, and their community that they carry with them. With and through that relationship between two people, we find everything. We find the kingdom of heaven. I really do believe that, even and maybe especially in the deepest, darkest, most broken places. So if we're working on the scale of the individual, it means that a tiny thing is actually huge in the way we normally think of it. It's not huge in terms of great, bright, shiny, flashing light successes, but it's huge in terms of the transmission of God's love and the transformation that occurs through that transmission. So yes, altering our sights from the too enormous horizon to the absolute finitude of a real live person in front of me with real live needs and real live gifts. That's where I find my salvation, and that's where I find God.
Mhm.
And those two things are inevitably linked.
And so in that, and I think that kind of speaks to a lot of the struggle that I think many clergy experience. I know I've experienced in these kind of what we have labeled as success. It's a valuing of the kind of the horizon of the bright and the flashy, um, instead of this kind of even understanding a vestry, a relationship with a vestry is a relationship, is a network of individual relationships and those kind of
Absolutely.
community pieces that you bring in. And so I guess I know, well, this is also another reason for the conversation that I should bring in now. You've written a book about your time in El Paso and Juarez. And I had the pleasure of being able to read it, and I think I told you it's the first book I've put down in one sitting in years. Um, and there's some pieces in there where you describe this exact phenomenon. I was wondering if you have a piece there that you wouldn't mind sharing
Yes.
with us.
So this excerpt comes about halfway through the book, and it's taken from when the community of asylum seekers was still living squashed into one block, pressed up against the port of entry in downtown Juarez, about 500 people just living in makeshift tents. And they had organized an incredible system to approach the top of the bridge, which was the dividing line between Mexico and the United States, and to ask for asylum, requests which were turned down and turned down and turned down and turned down, as you very well know, Lee, because you spent a lot of time up there
Mhm.
accompanying folks asking for that. So this little reading takes place during a dip when no one had been allowed to ask for asylum for an extremely long time. It had been so long since anyone had gotten through. 8 full days of trying and failing, trying and failing, trying and failing. So a prayer came easily as we approached the bridge again. For God's mercy to fill the hearts of the Border Patrol, for God's courage to fill the 3 families who were trying, and for God's grace to course through everyone who would not get through today, bringing them what they needed in ways they could actually feel. Afterward, I crouched down to speak more intimately with Luis and the other 2 kids in the group. I needed to express something to them, to imbue them with some urgent thing, and it turned out to be this: how extraordinary they were, and how lucky my country was that they were hoping to move there, and, most of all, that however hard the next few days may be, they had all they needed already, right there in their hearts. The intensity with which the kids listened to all this was sobering to the point of silencing. Stunned a bit by it, and wanting also to arm them again for the reality that awaited, I lumbered back up to my feet and gently cuffed Luis's jaunty sideways cap the way I always did. But he just kept looking at me and looking at me until he turned to follow his family, single file, up through the turnstiles and onto the bridge. We were all openly weeping by then, and at least partly because we all needed space to subdue both our hope and our fear, we quickly dispersed. Hoping for a few minutes of solitude, I set off for the black and white coffee shop on Juarez Ave where I'd become a regular. But another little boy, Samuel, far smaller than Luis and without the pizzazz, stopped me as I passed. He'd been trying to speak to me earlier, and I told him then that he needed to wait. So here he was again now, silent in front of me, with his even littler sister and his only just taller mom. I stopped, crouched down again to be at eye level with him, and waited. For a time, the 3 of them just stood there in a straight line, little boy, tiny girl, slightly taller mom. Then Samuel began to tell me what he'd been trying to tell me all afternoon, that his mother was afraid, that she had heard that the kids would be separated from her in detention and that they would be inside for months and months, and it would be freezing, and they'd have nothing to keep themselves warm and not enough to eat. And if either of the children, he or his sister, he said, looking down at his sister for a moment, started even to cry for any reason, or maybe even to squabble, that the guards would come in and beat them and then take them away. Was this true, he asked? This boy, who looked maybe 7, and who was speaking already so lucidly and fluently on behalf of his mother, who was too afraid to speak, even to me. This was what his mother had heard, he repeated. This was what people had told her, that they would be separated, even if they made just one mistake. I can't describe the intense effect this tiny boy speaking like a man on behalf of his terrified mother had on me. He stood so straight, and he spoke so quietly and also so clearly, because it was important what he was saying, he knew, and he might not get another chance, and he didn't want to forget anything. Is it true that me and my sister will be sent to live with strangers, he said. Do you have family over there? I asked. Yes. Then you will all probably go and live with them together. But they live in Orlando, Florida, he anguished, as if it were the real name of hell. I tried to let him know that every kid in the world wanted to go to Orlando, Florida, because that was where Disney World was, but I don't think he'd ever heard of Disney. Mickey Mouse lives there, I said, stupidly, turning to his little sister, and Donald Duck. Does Little Pony live there too? I love Little Pony, his sister said. Yes, Little Pony too, I said, and still the boy stood there, straight and as tall as he could make himself, asking his questions, voicing the fears of his family. I told him then that I was a priest and was therefore not allowed to lie, not ever, and that I had never heard of children being separated from their mother because they cried or squabbled, or of them being beaten. But it was not enough. It was as if Samuel were waiting for something. And then, all of a sudden, I knew what it was. I took off the bracelet I'd been wearing every day, the one Judy back in Boston had given me that read, "Though she be but small, she be fierce." And I wrapped it round his wrist, pressing the metal ends together so they touched around his tiny arm, telling him as I did so what it said. I added that the adults might take it away from him in detention, but that they would have to give it back when he left to go to Orlando, Florida, and that it didn't matter anyway whether he had it or not, because it was true what it said. He was fierce, and he already had everything he needed in his heart. I pointed to his heart then, and then to his sister's heart, and to his mother's heart, and told them that God lived in there. God. And that no one could ever take God away, ever. The intensity between us then must have been palpable, because a silent and creeping group of wide-eyed little kids started to gather around us. So I pointed to each of their hearts too, one by one, and very quietly told each one of them the same. God is in here. God is in here. God is in here. God is in here. Small, real things. Small, real things. This is what I kept trying to remember and to trust. Not big, impressive things, but small, real things are the way to love, with, through, and for the other. Small, not because we can't be bothered, but because we are small ourselves. And because every time we honor this smallness without shutting down, every time we acknowledge our lack of sufficiency and remain willing, even so, to both meet and be met by the other, well, whatever follows will both come from and lead to the realm of abundance some of us call God. And real transformation will happen, only on an infinitesimal scale. This is how small, real things make a small, real difference. And this is important too, Because small, real things are necessarily incarnate, they cannot be faked or sold or even advertised. They can only be sought in the moment and then welcomed. They require nothing flashy, nothing expensive, only a mute and muscularly passive stance, full of willingness and reliability and vulnerability. It isn't that small real things don't sometimes become large real things, because they do. It isn't the smallness that's the point, but the intention. It's as if the act of desiring and then seeking something small liberates us to receive without measure. As if by not aiming for bigness or for success, we somehow become freed from the regular marketplace world in which something is always given in exchange for something else, and enter instead a realm where giving and receiving become the same thing. Here are a couple of sentences by Sandra Cisneros, which cheered me up one dark night in El Paso, because they say more or less the same thing, only more simply. I don't know anything, she writes, but I know this. Whatever is done with love, in the name of others, without self-gain, whatever is done with the heart, on behalf of someone or something, whatever work we make with complete humility will always come out beautifully, and something more valuable than fame or money will come. This I know.